For 2019, Adidas has given us the first true sequel to the original Ultraboost. Focusing on 4 key areas, they've rethought and redesigned the sneaker, balancing the heritage of the original model with lessons learned. Let's take a look. Hey all, what is up? Reese here, and I've got a brand new sneaker pickup to show you. What we're looking at today is the Adidas Ultraboost 19 in the active red colorway. These saw a limited release on December 15th, 2018 on adidas.com, and will have a wider global release on February 21st, 2019 with a retail price of $180. Now, while you're watching this review, I'd love for you to leave a comment down below and just let me know your initial thoughts on the newest Ultraboost silhouette. If you enjoy this video, don't forget to hit that thumbs up button. And finally, if you're new to my channel, make sure to subscribe to stay up to date with all of my latest videos. After 4 years, Adidas has given us the first proper sequel to the original Ultraboost. For a little bit of historical context, they first introduced Boost cushioning back in 2013, and then 2 years later, the Ultraboost came out. Since then, every year they've updated the prime knit pattern on the upper, but the rest of the shoe has remained the same. The overall shape, style, and most importantly, the cushioning setup has been untouched, and it really has been a winning formula for Adidas. They introduced the silhouette as a performance running shoe, but it very quickly crossed over into the lifestyle field where a lot of people were wearing the shoe casually, and it lent itself well to that because of a strong mix of an overall clean design, a lot of available colorways, and a really, really comfortable build that made it something that people could easily wear kind of all day. As a pure running shoe, however, the reviews were a little bit more mixed. I actually logged a little more than 300 miles in a pair of the 2.0s, and while there were parts I really liked about the shoe, there were enough issues with it that kind of kept it from being a running shoe that I truly loved. And Adidas is really focused on the running aspect of the shoe and the performance metrics here with this new version. They took the time to kind of learn from the feedback they've received, kind of the lessons learned from the original model, and also the ways technology has improved to really rethink this shoe as a running shoe heading into 2019. This is going to be a first impressions video where we'll look at all the changes that were made and kind of the rationale behind that and what that hopefully means for these as a running shoe. And then I'll follow that up with a performance review here in the next month or so once I have time to log some miles on the shoes. I'll definitely make sure to get that out before the global release date for these coming up in February. But to think about what changes were made, Adidas really wanted to take a step back and look at the original Ultraboost. So they started by deconstructing the original shoe to its 17 components, and that was everything that makes up the shoe. The prime knit, the cage, the laces, the boost, the outsole, everything. And they really focused on what areas they could improve on and what areas would be most impactful for the shoe as a runner. And so they picked 4 key parts of the shoe to really focus on. And to be clear, that doesn't mean that the rest of the elements kind of came over from the original Ultraboost. You actually don't see anything that's lifted directly from the original design. You can definitely see the heritage, but they did kind of tweak everything. It was just those 4 areas that they really wanted to focus on making the most impact. And the 4 areas that they kind of decided on were the upper, the heel cup, the boost midsole, and the torsion system. So now we'll dive into a close-up view and kind of look at each of those one by one and talk about what changed and what that means for the shoe. We'll start by taking a look at the upper. These feature fully prime knit construction. And even though we saw prime knit on all of the original versions of the Ultraboost, it's actually a lot different here. It just feels a bit thinner and more kind of form-fitting around your foot, which is really nice. Adidas is actually calling this prime knit 360. And I didn't totally know what that meant until I got these in and actually removed the insole. And you can see the footbed below that is prime knit as well. So you have prime knit all the way around the foot. It's not just an upper that sits on top of the midsole. It's actually underneath your foot as well, kind of attached down to the midsole. And so that helps create a better fit all the way around your foot and add to kind of the stability and the lockdown. These definitely feel like they hug your foot a little bit more than the original versions of the Ultraboost. And I did go true to size. I've had the same size, or I've worn the same size in all 4 iterations of the original Ultraboost. And it's definitely the correct size, but you will just feel it a little bit more snug through the top of your foot. It's not bad, but it is just more of that sock-like fit. We also have a bit of a thinner prime knit, which is nice. It makes that feeling just a little bit nicer. And I'm really excited to see how these actually hold up and feel while running. Now, as far as the pattern goes, you can see you've basically got just a normal black knit here along kind of the outside of the toe box and then at the heel as well. And then we've got a really interesting pattern on the top of the toe box and running up through the tongue. You have kind of a cross section of white stitching that forms these boxes. And my assumption is that that's kind of for breathability. And so you have the white sections forming kind of a structure or a frame on top of the prime knit to give it a little bit of extra durability and also really keep the shoe a little bit more rigid, especially through the toe box where you don't need quite as much stretch. But then you have those openings where it's a little bit thinner and you kind of have that breathability since there are no actual holes that you can see like you would have on a mesh. We've got a couple sections of red prime knit running across here, and then there's also one under the tongue, and that's a place where it's even less stretchy than in other places and really provides a bit more of that lockdown. If you actually look underneath the insole, you can see the red threading goes all the way around there. And so, like I said, the toe box doesn't have a whole lot of give. That was something we saw them add with the Ultraboost 3.0, and then they kind of refined it a little bit on the 4.0. The 3.0 fit a little bit sloppy, but we've kind of seen them remove it here. But you do get a lot of stretchiness as we come up to the collar. You can see there's a ton here, much more than we ever had on the Ultraboost. And the actual opening here is a little bit smaller, but because of that stretch, you can get your foot in and then it's gonna kind of come back and form around there. You can see we've got a raw prime knit edge here, so there's not as much padding up at the front part of the tongue. You do still have a fair amount of padding here at the heel, and it kind of comes up around the Achilles again, like what we've seen before. The other big change on the upper then is the cage. And now I'll be honest, this is my least favorite part of the new design aesthetically. I just think it looks a little goofy with the shape and the size, and then the material isn't my favorite. It just doesn't mesh well with the rest of the design. But with that said, I'm really excited for what this potentially means for the cage as a kind of technical feature. On the original Ultraboost, I like the idea of a cage because when you have a knit upper, you can still get a little bit of movement with your foot. And so having something like that to kind of lock your foot into the shoe is something that can feel pretty nice. But the cage was so thick and kind of not incredibly flexible on the original versions. And so I found it hard to balance kind of having the shoe tied enough that I could feel the cage actually holding me down without it creating hot spots or pinching. And so this is a much more flexible material, and I'm hopeful that that's going to be better from a running perspective. Now it looks kind of like a almost like a mesh material. The pattern makes it look like it might have holes. It actually is a plasticky material though, and it is solid all the way through. But as you can see, it's got a lot of flex on the upper. Moving now to kind of the second element that Adidas talked about that they wanted to focus on with the shoe. We've got the heel cup area back here. Now this really isn't a heel cup. Adidas is calling this a 3D heel frame. And you can see it's got a similar shape to what we had on the original Ultraboost, but it's actually cut out so you lose a lot of the material, and along with that you lose a lot of the weight, but it still has the frame where you need it, and it's a bit of a thicker plastic to give it the same kind of rigidity that we had before. Now, one of the nice things here is there are a couple changes to the shoe that would make you think that this is going to be heavier, but I actually weighed these compared to a pair of the 4.0s in my in the same size, and these are actually like 15 grams lighter. It was about 400 for my size 13 4.0s and 385 for these. So it's cool to see that they were actually able to do some of these things and keep the weight roughly the same, maybe even lose a little bit as well. Since there's no place to have that Ultraboost branding, we do have it now here at the heel. Now the other really big change about the heel cup itself is that instead of sitting on top of the midsole and the cushioning setup, you can see it's actually mounted kind of into the boost right there. What that's going to do on is a couple different things. The first is it'll actually kind of like change where you're kind of stabilized into the shoe for kind of that left to right heel hold. Now I never had a problem feeling kind of wobbly back on my heel, so I don't think that's really going to have much of an impact on the shoe. What it will also change though is kind of the way the cushioning behaves here at the heel. Because you have it anchored down to the boost right there, it's not going to compress the same way, and what that means is you're going to end up with a little bit less of a squishy feeling at the heel. It's going to firm up a little bit, which will help a bit with stability. And now to counteract that, looking at the third area of focus for the shoe with the boost itself, Adidas has actually upped the ante and given us 20% more boost. And so even though we're seeing a bit of a firmness upgrade. The overall plushness of the ride is still going to be really, really nice. No, it definitely looked big, but the original Ultraboost looked like it had a lot of boost too. So real quick, we can compare the two just to see. If you look at the heel, it's incredibly apparent how much more boost you have, and you really have that all the way kind of through the midsole of the shoe. And so it's cool to see them like thinking about that. The Ultraboost has always kind of been the flagship for boost technology, and so to see them pack in more is always nice. But again, they were thinking about what that meant for the cushioning and not just adding more to add more. It kind of helps counteract some of the firmness that they've added, and also what we'll get to in a minute with the torsion system. Now, this is something that I'm really excited about with the changes to the cushioning. My least favorite part about the Ultraboost in its original form as a running shoe was that I found that, especially when I was doing longer runs in the shoe, they would actually cause some kind of soreness and fatigue for my feet and legs. And the reason for that is that if you have a really soft cushioning, it can actually be kind of detrimental, which is counterintuitive. But basically what happens is you can end up having two kind of moments of impact with each step. The first is, of course, when your shoe contacts the ground, but then if the cushioning is soft enough, you can actually run into a situation where you're kind of compressing it as far as it can go, and so it ends up bottoming out and you kind of hit that wall where you've compressed the foam all the way. And so by adding more foam and also by firming it up at the heel, you require more force to actually compress it all the way. And so I'm hopeful that by adding more boost, we're going to be able to retain the properties that people really enjoy about the shoe, while also making it a little bit better for runners. Now, in terms purely of just comfort every day, wearing these on one foot with the original Ultraboost on the other, you're not going to notice much of a difference. It's a very, very similar ride when just walking naturally. When wearing one of each, you do feel that you sit up higher on these, but it's not something major. Another small thing that you won't probably notice unless you're really looking for it is that they've increased the heel to toe drop. So basically the amount of cushioning at the heel compared to the amount of cushioning up at the toe is a little bit greater, which means the shoe, you can kind of see it slants forward a little bit more. That can be helpful for kind of moving you towards a good runner stride, but again, for kind of day-to-day wear, I don't think that's going to be a huge factor for most people. Finally, flipping to the outsole, we'll look at some of the last major changes. So this wasn't one of the 4 things that they highlighted, but we do see a new outsole pattern. You do still have your continental rubber, but it's a different pattern than what we saw on the 2, 3, and 4.0 Ultraboost. This is actually something that's taken from the Speed Factory AM4 line. These are actually built in the Speed Factories where we see those shoes come from. The Speed Factories are basically Adidas's kind of next generation sneaker factories. They're meant to enhance the process, make it quicker and easier to build shoes, and also kind of be the place where you find kind of the newest technology for building sneakers, and that's where these are coming from as well. So we've got the same outsole with a couple changes. You've got some grooves cut into the different rows that should help with traction, but other than that, the pattern's pretty much the same. Now under here, the 4th and final change that Adidas really wanted to highlight with this shoe is the torsion system. You can see it looks a little bit different than what we're used to with the original Ultraboost, and even under the hood, there's a lot more that we don't see. So the torsion system originally was used by Adidas to help, and this was way before the Ultraboost, but it's a system that helps kind of give the shoe stability from side to side so it's not twisting and flexing in ways that you don't really want it to. They've also adapted it here on the Ultraboost to be a tool that helps provide kind of some of that energy responsiveness or kind of that spring forward in your steps. So you've got it coming up as kind of like a fork. So from here, it forks off to the front in 2 directions and then also to the heel in 2 directions. And basically, it's a stiff enough material that once you kind of bend it with your step, it wants to spring back into place and kind of push you forward. And so that's kind of the dual purpose of this torsion system. If you look up pictures, it's a lot bigger than what we had on the original Ultraboost. And that again is going to help balance out between the plushness of the ride, but also having responsiveness so that it's a shoe that feels fairly quick and lively, that you can push a little bit when you're running and get a good pace. We went through a ton of information there. I tried to cover everything with the new model and the new changes. If I missed anything, be sure to let me know down in the comments below. If you haven't already, let me know what your first impressions are of this sneaker, and stay tuned to my channel in the coming month and a half to see a full performance review. I'm gonna put 30 to 50 miles on these and then see kind of how these changes actually hold up out on the trails and how they actually compare to the original Ultraboost as a running shoe. With all that said, that's gonna wrap up our first look at the Ultraboost 19 in the active red colorway. Thank you so much for watching and have a great day.